About 10 years ago, I started to put information about myself online so it could be found by strangers. This may not be much of a bold claim for an adult to make, but in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to try and convince you that this is something we should be letting kids do too. So to explain, I need to figure this out. There we go. To explain, I have to go back about 15 years to when I was asked to help start a small school off the west coast of Canada. There were 6 teachers who helped start this school. Of those 6 teachers, I was the only one who was remotely interested in computers, so I got to be the technology director. I also got to be the math teacher, the PE teacher, the geography teacher, and the history teacher, which is what happens when you start a small school. This was an awesome job, but it had one downside. I had to commute about 1 hour each way every day, so that's 2 hours in the car. But around the same time, I purchased my first iPod, and I discovered podcasts. There was a couple of podcasts that I found really helpful. There was one called Save Our Schools that was put out by an ed tech director at the International School of Bangkok, and there's another one called The Virtual Staff Room that was created by a teacher in Australia. And these guys were ed tech gurus. They knew everything I needed to know. And they were getting online every week or every 2 weeks, and they were having conversations with other ed tech gurus around the world, usually on Skype, recording them and putting them on iTunes. So I had found the professional development jackpot. All I had to do was download these podcasts to my iPod and listen to them while I drove to school and back. And in about a year, I was able to talk quite knowledgeably about most things to do with education and technology. Fast forward a couple of years to 2005 when my daughter was born. By now I'd been listening to these podcasts for a few years, and I started to realize something. I started to realize that actually there wasn't that much difference between these gurus and myself. The biggest difference was that they were willing to put their thoughts, their ideas, their experiences, their questions online and talk about them in a public way, whereas that terrified me. I was quite happy to listen to them and take the information and use it in my day-to-day practice. But the idea of sharing like they were, I found frightening. And I found it frightening for a couple of reasons. One was I really didn't think I had anything to say. And 2, I was afraid that somebody would disagree with me and prove me wrong. So I'd taken a year off to help look after my daughter, and I had some time on my hands. So I set a goal that I was going to figure out how to blog and how to use Twitter. My routine went something like this. Every Monday morning I'd drop my daughter off at daycare, and I'd go to a cafe, and I'd sit down on my laptop and I'd make myself write a blog post, and I would hit publish. Then in the evenings, it often took a long time to put her to sleep, and I'd be stuck in her room waiting for her to go to sleep, so I would get on Twitter and see what people were saying on Twitter, and I would retweet or comment on something I found interesting. Now, this was actually a terrifying experience. Every time I had to push that publish button, or every time I hit retweet, I was at war between the me who knew there was something going on here, that this was a skill set that I wanted to figure out, and the me who was convinced I had nothing to say. And I need to make a point here. I wasn't tweeting about what I had for breakfast, and I wasn't writing blog posts about my favorite TV show. I was sharing my thoughts about education and technology. I was publicly expressing my passion for something and what I was interested in. And it worked. The gurus didn't pay any attention to me, but it turns out there's lots of people out there also trying to figure out how to reach out and connect online. So I connected with other teachers who were also blogging. We commented on each other's blog posts. We retweeted and commented on each other's tweets. And in the process, I started to build a very small personal learning network, or PLN. That PLN is now a lot bigger and includes a lot of really amazing, talented educators. And the process of building that PLN has been one of the most rewarding and encouraging things I think I've ever done in my professional career. So in this process, there's always been a question going on in the back of my mind. And that question is, why aren't we doing this in schools? Why aren't more students blogging? Why aren't more classrooms on Twitter? Why aren't students connecting with peers around the world who share common passions and interests? And I want to address this question a little bit in a sideways. I want to take a detour for a second and talk about another technology like social media, is also very powerful, very useful to us, and also has some potential downfalls. I want to talk about the car. So this is the first car I ever drove. It was huge, and I was really tiny. And I have this memory of driving this car around. We lived in a pretty fancy neighborhood. I have this memory of driving this car with my dad beside me, and I could barely see over the steering wheel. And this is what happened when I got to corners. I couldn't judge the distance, so I would drive over my neighbor's lawns. And I put a little puff of smoke there to show me zooming away from the site before anybody noticed. But the thing is my dad didn't get angry at me. He didn't take away my driving privileges. He recognized that this car at this point was too much technology for me, so he got me driving lessons. Luckily, before I had to take my driving test, my mother bought a little tiny powder blue Chevette, which was much easier to drive, and I was able to pass my driving test without any problems. And I have another memory of her sitting beside me soon after I got my license. And I was driving down country roads, and I could tell she was terrified because her back was straight and her knuckles were turning white on the handle on the door handle. But she was trying really hard not to let me know she was terrified, because she recognized that me getting practice driving this car was a really important thing to do. So when I reflect on this, I think, my parents didn't always know how to teach me to drive, and sometimes they were terrified to let me drive. But they recognized that this was a valuable skill and something I had to do, and so they found the resources and tools to help me do this. So, come back to my question. Why are more students not connecting with peers around the world who share similar interests and passions? And I think the honest truth is, part of the reason is that us adults and teachers don't really know how to do it. My parents could teach me how to drive because they knew how to drive and their parents had taught them how to drive. But most adults and teachers can't really lay claim to that same level of expertise. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about expertise in using WhatsApp to connect with your friends or post to Facebook. I'm talking about leveraging the power of these tools to connect with a whole world of experts and people with similar interests out there. So our lack of expertise puts us at kind of a disadvantage. It also makes us kind of prone to approaching these new technologies from a position of fear where you can only see the downsides. I would argue there are a lot of downsides about letting a teenager drive a car, but we still do it. We recognize that this is an important skill and tool that teenagers need to have. So as a society, we've come up with systems and processes to help them do this. So what do? We're not the experts. Luckily, being an expert isn't all that necessary. Being a sage or a sage or imparting our wisdom isn't really what's needed here. What we need to be doing is learning along with our students and children. And even though we may not know about the intricacies of hashtags or how to take a good selfie, we still have a lifetime's worth of experience that's worth sharing. As adults, we know how to solve problems, we know how to identify bias, we know how to give constructive feedback, etc., etc. But if we're not in these spaces, if we're not using these tools, if we're not learning how to drive, then it becomes really difficult for us to share our expertise and our knowledge in a way that's relevant or useful. So it's going to be messy, but it's really vitally important. Technology and social media are in our world today, and they're going to be in our world in the future. And I really believe that the people who can leverage the benefits of these technologies and avoid the pitfalls are going to have significant opportunities available to them that wouldn't be available otherwise. So for the rest of my time available, I want to talk to you about one of those opportunities, the opportunity to connect. There's a Canadian researcher and educator called George Siemens, and he's actually created a theory to describe what I'm talking about. He calls it connectivism. And basically what his theory is saying is that when peers are online, finding information, sharing what they find out with each other, you build a connected community of learners who can support you in your learning. And what I wanted to do now is I wanted to share with you a story that only happened last week, but I think illustrates the power of connected learning. So I want to come back. You can see I really like my GIF here. I want to tell you the story of how I made this GIF. So, oh, there we go. In my ICT class recently, my students have been wrapping up a data presentation unit. And the last couple classes, a few of them figured out how to insert GIFs. And the excitement in the classroom was contagious. And I thought, how can I tap into this? How can I use this excitement to get them to learn more ICT skills? I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could teach them how to make GIFs? And I used to do this in my last school, but it was a really onerous process with expensive desktop tools. It took a long time, and I thought, well, now I have access to all these cloud tools. Surely I can figure out a way that we can do it in a simpler fashion. And while I was thinking about this, a member of my PLN, who's a technology coordinator in KL, he posted to his blog his ideas for how to do this. And I never talked about this, we happened to be thinking about the same thing. He had this great idea to use Google Drawings and Photos to help students make GIFs. And I looked at this and I read his blog post and I thought, this is really cool, but wouldn't it be great if you used Google Slides? So I replied to him on Twitter. This is all, by the way, happening kind of in the off times during my day. I didn't sit down at my desk to do this. I just kind of had a few minutes here and there to have this conversation with him. And it turns out he had considered using slides, but wasn't sure it would work. So this got me really excited about the possibility of kind of, adding to this conversation. So I sat down and I made an animation with slides and using some of Jeff's workflow, and I sent it back to him. So we're not just holding on to this information, we're publicly sharing it with each other so we can all benefit. A really cool thing happened next. Gretchen, who is another member of our PLN, who also lives in KL, she was kind of following along because we were online in public. And she actually knew of a really cool Google tool that would save us a lot of time with our workflow. We'd never heard of it because it's quite an obscure tool. It was actually created by Gretchen's online mentor, who's a part of her PLN. So because we were public, she was able to contribute this information to our conversation. And so I started Googling for this, and I actually came across a blog post by another connected educator who had come up with an amazing workflow using Google Slides, Gretchen's tool, and a third tool I'd never even heard about, and it was by far the best way to do this that I'd heard about. So I shared it back. So Jeff, because he was willing to put his idea out there, even though it wasn't a fully formed idea, but he put it out there, was able to benefit from all of this thinking from different brains, and ended up with a much better solution to what he had originally tried to do. And Gretchen really wrapped things up with a beautiful little hashtag poem. Iterate, share, solutions are out there. And this is something I really believe. I really believe that when we're sharing publicly, when we are creating connections, when we're willing to get into a dialogue online about our ideas, then we can create community and find solutions. So this is my current favorite book. It's by another Canadian educator, Jennifer Cassett-Todd. And one of the things I love about this book is that she tells stories of students. She's gone and found students who are leveraging the power to connect, leveraging the power of social media to learn and make a difference in the world. So I'm going to just take a minute and I'm going to just share a couple of their stories with you. Aidan Aird is a multiple science fair award winner, and he would go to these science fairs and he would meet lots of other innovators and entrepreneurs like him, and they would have an amazing time, and he would come home buzzed with all the cool stuff going on. When he got home, no one knew anything about it, and it was like he'd never gone. So he decided to do something about it using social media. He started this website, and he started using Twitter and other social media tools to basically promote all these amazing kids who are doing amazing things online. And this has turned into a huge resource for supporting and promoting STEM skills. Hannah Alper is a committed environmentalist, but she's not just making sure there's more recycling bins. She's using her blog and she's using Twitter and she's using social media to promote her ideas and get more people interested in her ideas. Not only that, if you go to her blog, she's got a whole page about how you can contact her to be a keynote speaker at your event. She's 14. And then this guy, Kieran Lee, when he was 9 years old, his mother, she was a university professor, she decided to do an experiment with the university students to see how long it took a tweet to go around the world. And Kieran helped her to kind of collect the information. So at the end of 24 hours, the tweet had gone to 30 countries, it had 2,274 views, and it had 264 comments. And by this point, Kieran was pretty excited about the potential of social media, so he asked his mother if he could start his own blog. And apologies to Kern, I'm going to get this wrong, but his first blog post was titled something like, "Where in the world are you from?" He had 110 different comments from different people on that blog post. Each one he individually went and responded to and researched, learned about the country. What a cool way to learn about the world. I'm pretty sure Kern knows more than I do about the world. His current project with his mom is this website called DigCitKids, which is a website for kids to give digital citizenship information to kids rather than it always coming from us adults. So the thing about these kids is they didn't learn any of this stuff in school, but they did all have a caring adult who worked with them, supported them, learned along with them while they were trying to figure this stuff out. And I'm pretty sure these adults all believed, as I do, and as AJ Giuliani does, that our job is not to prepare students for something. Our job is to help students prepare themselves for anything. And I think helping students connect and leverage the power of social media can be a part of doing this. So to wrap up, I think the future is really bright for connected learners. Not just for the learners, but also for the future. Because in a world where students can connect, share, find like minds, reply respectfully to unlike minds, bounce ideas off each other and iterate, then innovation and change can happen. The solutions are out there. Thank you.